Sacramento was Gerald's hometown. Gerald had lived here for 18 years. Now Gerald was 27 years old. He had been away from Sacramento for 9 years. Many things had happened to Gerald in the past 9 years. Sometimes Gerald felt grateful to those people who had set him up. 9 years ago, without them, Gerald would not have joined Night Watch or become who he was now. Hearing Gerald, Jessica smiled and said, "Are you a local here?" Gerald smiled. "Yes, I was born here. However, I have been away for a long, long time." "Really?" Daphne, who carried a drawing board, glanced at Gerald with curiosity and asked, "Why did you come back this time?" "To visit your relatives and friends here." "To work?" Gerald thought, "to visit my relatives. Is that so? In Sacramento, I don't think I have any relatives, apart from my parents." Gerald thought for a moment and said, "Both." With a faint smile, Jessica said, "By the way, Mr. Kenneth, what do you do?" Gerald rubbed his nose and said, "Well, I haven't found a job yet. Unemployed." This answer took both Jessica and Daphne by surprise. Right then, a middle-aged man came over and said to Jessica, "Ms. Lang." Speaking, the middle-aged man took the suitcases from both Jessica and Daphne. "The car is waiting outside. Shall we leave?" "For the company." Jessica shook her head and said, "I will treat my friend to dinner first." The middle-aged man was surprised. Then, he quickly said, "Ms. Lang, the company has been in a mess after you left. The whole company knew that you would come back to Sacramento today. They are waiting for you to set things right." Jessica frowned. Gerald smiled and said, "Never mind. Work comes first. I will stay in Sacramento for a long time and may settle here. We may dine together when it's convenient. Moreover, what I did was a trifle. Don't take it to heart." Jessica became embarrassed as she said, "I am terribly sorry. How about tomorrow? Let's dine together tomorrow night." Gerald nodded and said, "No problem." "Okay, I will contact you online later," Jessica said. Gerald nodded. After watching Jessica and Daphne leave, Gerald turned around and left to hail a taxi. Behind Gerald, Tyrone stood not far away with a mask. With a gloomy face, Tyrone looked at Gerald's back. After a moment, a voice sounded, "Tyrone. Ads by Pub Future." Tyrone looked over, saw Henley in the crowd, and quickly walked over. "Henley, TSK, how is my task for you?" Henley asked. "Done," Tyrone said proudly. "Great." Henley nodded with satisfaction. Then, he said, "Let's go. I'll take you to see the beauties of Los Angeles. Don't forget yourself. You are a celebrity anyway." "Henley, come on. There are so many beauties in Los Angeles. I met 2 beautiful women on the plane, but a killjoy appeared." "Screw him." Tyrone pointed to Gerald, who was far away. Henley looked at Gerald and frowned. "Hey, he looks like Gerald." Then, he shook his head again. Henley didn't think that Gerald had the guts to come back to Sacramento. In his opinion, Gerald must feel lucky to find a decent job in Los Angeles. Gerald has a bad reputation in Sacramento. He will humiliate himself if he comes back here. Henley thought. "Let's go." Henley put his arm around Tyrone's shoulder and said, "Damn it. You are a man. Why do you wear makeup? It disgusts me. Come on. The little girls love me in this way. With this attire, I can hit on any girl," Tyrone said proudly. "It can help me attract female fans." Gerald lined up and soon got in a taxi. In the car, he said, "Happiness Neighborhood, please." Happiness Neighborhood was the name of a community where Gerald's parents lived. Gerald kept an eye on his parents when he was still on night watch. After Gerald got into trouble, the Kenneth family disowned his parents, drove them out of the family company, and confiscated their house. The Kenneth family was influential in Sacramento, so it was difficult for Gerald's father to find a job at first. After Gerald became a watchman, things changed. Gerald's father was headhunted by one company and got a handsome salary. After that, the life of Gerald's parents was back on the right track. Gerald couldn't tell his parents that he was a watchman, so his parents still thought that Gerald was in prison. Therefore, Gerald felt bad. 1 hour later, the taxi stopped at the destination, and Gerald paid the fare. Gerald stood at the entrance of the neighborhood. With agitation and excitement, Gerald hadn't seen his parents for 9 years. After a deep breath, Gerald walked into the neighborhood. He asked the security guard for directions, then held his backpack tightly, and walked forward. Room 504, Building 5. Gerald thought. He walked out of the elevator and looked at the door of room 504. Upon his approach, Gerald found that the door of room 504 was ajar, and a voice came out of the room. "Mason Kenneth, how could you say that?" A voice came from the inside. "Your surname is Kenneth anyway. You are the vice president of Universe Group, so you have the right to sign the contract. Moreover, this cooperation will benefit your company, too." Mason was the name of Gerald's father. "Sorry that I can't," Mason sighed. "Moreover, the Kenneth family disowned us." This voice sounded tired, so Gerald felt sad. "We did so because Gerald raped a girl." There came a sneer. "Mason, I tried to be nice. You had better sign this contract. If you are stubborn, I promise that you can't lead a peaceful life in Sacramento. You will get harassed every day." Gerald knew who this visitor at his home was. This visitor was Kerry Kenneth, who had proposed to the Kenneth family to disown Gerald and his parents back then. Kerry was a distant relative to Gerald. Back then, Kerry worked for Mason. He was the biggest beneficiary after the fall of Mason. Kerry took over the company that Mason had been in charge of. Kerry said after a sneer, "Without the annual performance assessment, I wouldn't ask for your help. I do want to be nice to you. But you don't know what is good for you." Mason sighed and then said, "Kerry, don't go too far. In the past 9 years, I stayed away from you. I am not a member of the Kenneth family now. Why are you still so ruthless? Cut that crap. Will you sign the contract or not?" Kerry became a little impatient. He sneered and said, "If you don't sign, I can guarantee that neither you nor your wife can have a good life. I remember that your wife has asthma. There was a hint of anger in Mason's voice. "He won't sign." Gerald appeared at the door, and his voice was chilling cold. The people in the living room looked at the door at the same time. "Gerald." Mason trembled violently. Gerald looked at his father and thought, his hair became gray. He must have suffered great psychological pressure during the past 9 years. However, he still hangs in there. Looking at the wrinkles on his father's face, Gerald ignored Kerry, put down his backpack, and trembled slightly. Facing Mason, Gerald slowly said, "Dad, I'm back." Mason's eyes instantly became moist. Mason forgot Kerry, and his eyes became red. Then, tears flowed down Mason's face. Mason walked to Gerald, wiped his tears, and patted Gerald on the shoulder. Then, Mason said, "Good to have you back. Good to have you back. Hey, weren't you sentenced to life imprisonment? Why are you here? Did you escape from prison?" Kerry, who still sat on the sofa in the living room, asked. Then, Kerry remembered something. He looked at Gerald and asked with a sneer, "Did you just tell your father not to sign the contract?" Gerald wiped his wet eyes, looked at Kerry, and said word by word, "I heard you threaten my father, didn't you?" "I just heard you threatening my father, right?" Gerald glanced at Kerry with a cold and emotionless look. It made Kerry, who was sitting on the sofa, feel as if he had fallen into the abyss and tremble in fear. Quote. Kerry stuttered, scared by Gerald's eyes. When Mason saw the scene, his expression changed slightly. He was worried that Gerald would be sent to prison again for hitting people. After all, Gerald had just been released, so Mason hurriedly said to Carey, "Just go. I can't sign this contract." Carey wanted to threaten Mason again, but under Gerald's gaze, he did not dare to speak and stood up with his briefcase. When Carey passed by Gerald, Gerald's cold voice rang in his ear, "If you dare to call people to find trouble, you will bear the consequences." Gerald could imagine what kind of suffering his parents had encountered in the past 9 years. In the past, Gerald was in night watch and could not come back, nor could he do anything. But now, he was back. He would not let his parents suffer any grievance. Carey swallowed hard and walked past Gerald. Seeing him leave, Gerald put away his cold and murderous aura. He put down his backpack and looked at Mason, saying, "Dad, I'm sorry. I made you worry about me for 9 years. Mason was in tears. His nose wrinkled as he said, "It's good that you can come back. You know what? In these 9 years, your mother and I went to the prison to see you many times, but we didn't see you once. I'm fine, but your mother has always been very sad. But now you are back." Gerald's nose was a little sour. He looked around and said, "Oh, right, where is my mother?" "Your mother went to your aunt's. It's your aunt's birthday today. I was going to go with her, but Carey called me and said that he had something to talk to me about, so I stayed. Since you are back, go with me to meet your aunt and the others," said Mason. As he said that, Mason sighed again and said, "Ever since your incident, the Kenneth family cut off all ties with us. Only your mother's relatives stay with us and don't leave us alone." Mason felt a lot better. He patted Gerald on the shoulder and said, "Let's go, I'll take you there." Gerald nodded, threw his backpack on the sofa, and went out with Mason. Mason had a handsome annual income. Now he bought a mansion and had a good car. After getting into the car, Mason kept telling Gerald about what had happened in the past 9 years. There seemed to be endless things he wanted to tell Gerald. Ads by Pub Future. Gerald listened to him quietly. In fact, Gerald knew a lot of things. Although he could not meet his parents when he was in night watch, he had always paid attention to their affairs. Soon, they arrived at a community. After parking the car, they walked toward a building. Just as they went downstairs, Gerald suddenly looked in a direction. A young man in his 20s was walking out of the community with his head lowered. Gerald's eyes lit up slightly. Gerald knew this person. It was Jacob Eden, Gerald's playmate since they were children. Jacob was not from a rich family, but he had a very good relationship with Gerald. They had known each other since kindergarten, and they had been classmates since they graduated from high school. After graduating from high school, Gerald was admitted to California State University. Jacob was not good at studying, so he was admitted to a plain university. Since Gerald was imprisoned, they lost contact. Jacob's appearance had not changed much during the past 9 years, but he seemed to have been rejected and was a little dejected. "Dad, go to Lilia's place first. I will join you later," Gerald said. "Huh?" Mason was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Your aunt's house is in building 7 to 8. I will tell them about you. Return in advance." Gerald nodded. After saying goodbye to his father, Gerald ran over to Jacob. Jacob walked to the gate of the community. He was carrying 2 gifts in his hands. At this time, he was standing on the road and seemed to be waiting for a taxi. "Jacob." Gerald's lips moved slightly as he called to Jacob. "Huh?" Jacob replied. He turned his head and looked over. When he saw Gerald, his dejection instantly disappeared. Then, he widened his eyes in surprise and said happily, "Damn it, Gerald." Gerald was amused when he saw Jacob's surprised look. Jacob had not seen Gerald for 9 years, and Gerald was treated as a rapist. But Jacob was not afraid or disdained Gerald at all when he saw Gerald. Instead, Jacob was happy and excited. This was Gerald's best friend. Jacob put the gifts on the ground and walked to Gerald. He punched Gerald in the chest and said, "Damn, you suddenly disappeared before. I asked your classmate who have a good relationship with you. They all said that you were arrested for raping women. What happened back then?" Jacob looked Gerald up and down and asked. "You don't doubt me?" Gerald asked in surprise. "I know you well. You don't have the guts to do that, although you are indeed lustful," Jacob said with a smile. Gerald was speechless. He coughed and sighed. "It's a long story. I don't know what exactly happened back then. The only thing I can be sure of is that I was framed." "So you spent 9 years in prison for nothing?" Jacob frowned and asked. "I was taken away as soon as I was imprisoned, and then I was admitted by a mysterious troop. 3 years ago, I lost my memory because of a mission, and I only recovered my memory recently," Gerald said seriously. Jacob was stunned by Gerald's words. After hearing that, he said with a dumbfounded look, "Are you kidding me?" Gerald sighed. He had told the truth, but Jacob didn't believe it. However, Gerald was still very happy. They had not seen each other for 9 years, but they were not estranged from each other. Looking at the gifts in his hand, Gerald frowned and asked, "What about you? I saw you looked dejected just now. Did you run into trouble at work? They rejected your gifts?" "No." Jacob sighed and continued. "I went to see my father-in-law and was kicked out." "You were driven away?" Gerald asked in surprise. "What happened?" "It's all because of money." Jacob sighed again. "My girlfriend and I started dating in my junior year at university. It has been 6 years now. You know, my parents are workers and they don't have much savings. I was not doing well in my study, so after I graduated, I found a very plain job, to be a salesman. I spent 5 years saving up some money. With my parents' help, I was barely able to scrape together a down payment on a house in Sacramento. I thought that I could marry my girlfriend when I got a house. But their conditions are really..." Speaking of this, Jacob shook his head. Gerald frowned and said, "What are their conditions?" "First, we have to add my girlfriend's name to the housing contract. That's fine because I love her, but they asked for $160,000 of bride price," Jacob said. Gerald was stunned for a moment. $160,000 was indeed too much for an ordinary person. "Why did they ask for so much?" Gerald asked in surprise. "She has a younger brother. Maybe her family wants to buy a house for his younger brother, so they asked me for $160,000. Anyway, if I can't give them $160,000, I can't marry my girlfriend, and we have to break up." "What's your girlfriend's opinion?" Gerald asked. Speaking of this, Jacob sighed. Again, she spoke up for her family. She said that she wanted to be with me for a lifetime, but if I was not even willing to give them $160,000, it meant that I didn't love her enough. "Didn't she know that you couldn't afford it?" Gerald asked with a frown. "She did, but she didn't change her mind. Moreover, she said that her family has set her up on a blind date. If I can't fork out $160,000, I will have to break up." Jacob once again lowered his head in dejection. Gerald was speechless. Jacob's girlfriend was foolish. Hearing Jacob's words, Gerald was speechless. As a son-in-law who had been bullied for 3 years, Gerald thought that he was miserable enough. But compared with Jacob, he felt that Jacob was really unlucky. He frowned and said, "What about her brother? What does her brother think?" Jacob curled his lips and said, "Don't mention it. Her brother always goofs around and likes to gamble. But he is the only male descendant in the family, so he has been spoiled since childhood. I can't do anything about that. As he said this, he looked at Gerald and asked, Gerald, give me a suggestion. What should I do? Gerald touched his nose and said, did your girlfriend consider your life after you got married? If you borrowed $160,000 after you got married, you would have to pay the mortgage and the debt together. Did she not consider this? Jacob said dejectedly, she probably doesn't want to marry me. She just wants me to back down. But we have been dating for 6 years. I love her very much, and I can feel that she loves me. It's just that. Gerald let out a sigh and said, Jacob, to be honest, I think you should break up. You should calm down and analyze your current situation. If you gave them $160,000 and you got married, what would happen next? Your girlfriend is obviously helping her brother. He is a gambler, and you don't know how many debts you will have to pay for him. In the future, not only will you raise your own family, but you also have to raise her family. It's fine if you raise her parents. But do you want to raise her brother, to take care of him even after he gets married and has children? Gerald calmly analyzed the situation for Jacob. Jacob had a conflicted look on his face. He was just an ordinary person. After his girlfriend put forward such a request, Jacob had already thought of breaking one up. It was just that he really liked his girlfriend. After all, they had been together for 6 years. Of course, the reason why Gerald asked him to break up was that he felt that Jacob could be able to find a better woman than his current girlfriend. From Jacob's reaction, Gerald had already made up his mind to help Jacob. At the very least, he would not let Jacob worry about money for the rest of his life. You have a point. Jacob let out a sigh and said, but I still don't want to leave her. Jacob adds by pub future. At this time, a sound came from the entrance of the community. Gerald and Jacob turned to look. At the entrance of the community, 2 people walked over. One was a middle-aged man, and the other was a girl. Jacob said in a low voice, she is my girlfriend, Kelly Frost. The other person is her father, Derek Frost. Gerald narrowed his eyes slightly. He had thought that Kelly should be a beauty, but she is just agreeable. Being surrounded by beauties like Valerie and Audrey, Gerald only thought that Kelly was not beautiful at all. At this time, they walked over and looked at Gerald. Derek looked at Jacob and said, Jacob, Kelly is old enough to get married and couldn't afford to waste her youth. If you don't have $160,000, don't waste her time. Just break up with her. Kelly looked calm. Obviously, she had chased Jacob out just to break up with him, and her father thought the same. Jacob's expression changed slightly. He looked at Kelly and Derek and sighed, you are over the top. In fact, as long as you don't ask for too much, I will be filial to you. Although I don't earn much, my salary is above the average standard in Sacramento. Since you have decided, Kelly and I can only break up. After he said this, Gerald could feel that Jacob had been drained of strength. When Kelly heard that, her expression changed slightly, but she quickly regained her calm. Don't blame us. Blame yourself for not being able to give Kelly happiness. Derek looked at Jacob and said, that's enough. In the future, let's be parted forever. Jacob gritted his teeth and nodded. Gerald slightly raised his eyebrows and said, the price of marriage is too high. I thought that they were selling their daughters. Jacob was angry, but his edges had long been smoothed by reality. When he heard what Gerald said, he did not interrupt. Gerald, after all, he thought the same. Derek looked at Gerald and said, who are you? It has nothing to do with you. Gerald touched his nose, patted Jacob's shoulder, and said, all right, Jacob, there is nothing to be sad about. You'll find a better woman. As long as you have money, you can find all kinds of women. Kelly frowned. Derek sneered and said, the premise is that you have to get rich. If he was rich, he and Kelly should have been married long ago. He can only manage to pay a down payment on a small house. Kelly, don't think too much. This kind of man is not worthy of you. Let's go. Your aunt set you up on a blind date. That man's conditions are much better. You will meet him tomorrow. Rich men might not take a fancy to your daughter, Gerald said with a sneer. Kelly frowned. She turned to look at Jacob and said, Jacob, what does your friend mean? Do you have to make things worse? If you could be more aspirant, we wouldn't have ended up like this. Exactly. Don't blame us for being ruthless, trash, Derek said. Jacob seemed to be afraid of this woman and did not dare to answer back. Gerald patted Jacob and said with a smile, well, don't worry about it. You want to earn money, right? Come to my company. Tomorrow, I will give you an annual salary of $800,000. When Gerald finished his words, Jacob was stunned. He thought that Gerald shouldn't have much money after he had just returned to Sacramento, and Gerald said so just to help him win back his dignity. Jacob silently looked at Gerald with gratitude. Derek and Kelly, who were just about to leave, stopped. Derek turned to look at Gerald and said disdainfully, you have a company and want to give him an annual salary of $800,000. Don't brag, Kelly said sarcastically, I've never heard of him having such a rich friend. Gerald smiled and said to Jacob, give me your bank card. The best way to deal with Kelly was to make them regret it. When Jacob heard Gerald's words, he didn't know what Gerald was up to, but he still took out a bank card. Gerald took out his phone and quickly entered the number of the bank card. Then he said to Jacob, I will take you to my company tomorrow, and I have paid you an annual salary in advance. Ding! At the same time, Jacob received a text message. Jacob took out his phone with a dumbfounded expression. However, in the next instant, his pupils suddenly contracted, and he said, Gerald, you really transferred $800,000 to me. Are you crazy? Gerald smiled and said, it's prepayment. Just come to work tomorrow. Who are you lying to? Kelly sneered. Then she stepped forward and grabbed Jacob's phone. When she saw the text message, Kelly looked pale. She looked at Gerald and said, you really gave him $800,000. Gerald chuckled. Why should I lie to you? It isn't worthwhile to lie to you. From tomorrow on, Jacob is one of the richest men in Sacramento. Derek also looked at Jacob's phone and was pale as well. Jacob was overwhelmed by the surprise. He never expected that Gerald was not joking. At this time, Derek was still a little confused. After a short moment of astonishment, Derek smiled and said, Jacob, you're rich now. And the bride price is no longer a burden to you. You and Kelly have been together for so many years. I think you should get married now. Gerald was stunned. He originally wanted Derek and Kelly to regret it, but he didn't expect Derek to be so shameless. Jacob let out a long sigh. He gave Gerald a grateful look, then looked at Kelly and Derek and said, forget it, we have already broken up. Return the phone to me. Facing such a kind of thing, Jacob was angry. He had spent 6 years, but in the end, he had lost to reality. The girl had just said that he was out of her league before, but now, as he got $800,000, she wanted to get back with him. Jacob found it so ridiculous. At this moment, he finally figured out who these people were. He looked at Kelly calmly and said, we have already broken up. Give me back my phone. We will go our separate ways from now on. Kelly's expression changed slightly. She had thought that Jacob would listen to her all the time. As long as she said a word, Jacob would return to her obediently. Hearing this, she looked at Jacob and said, you really don't love me. Jacob smiled and shook his head. He went forward and snatched his phone back. Then, he let out a sigh and said, I don't love you. Over the past 6 years, I have loved you sincerely. You asked me to add your name to the house's title deed and I agreed. You asked for $160,000 to buy your brother a house. I really couldn't afford it. Under that circumstance, you didn't give in at all and I just couldn't afford it at all. Now you can afford it, Kelly said. Jacob, let's get married. Jacob laughed. Tears streamed down his face. He looked at Kelly and said lightly, just now, I was utterly disappointed. You don't wanna marry me, but money. With that, he turned around. Kelly still wanted to say something, but Gerald frowned and said, all right. Just leave. Now, you are not worthy of my buddy. Derek and Kelly changed their expressions slightly. Gerald put his arms around Jacob's shoulder and said, ignore these people. Let's go. As he spoke, he directly took Jacob away from the gate of the compound. The two of them walked to a place where no one was around. Jacob exhaled and said, Gerald, thank you for just now, but I've figured it out. After what happened just now, I feel much better. Gerald patted his shoulder and said, don't be bound by a woman. It's good that you can see her through. Yes. Jacob wiped his tearful eyes. It could be seen that he had invested a lot in this relationship. He took out his phone and said, give me your bank account. I will transfer the money to you. Gerald smiled and said, what are you thinking? Do you think I am joking? What I said is true. I will take you to work. Ads by Pub Future. Tomorrow. You really have a company? Jacob asked in surprise. Gerald nodded and said, why would I lie to you? And I didn't lie to you just now. I haven't been in prison for the past few years. Jacob looked suspicious and felt shocked. Gerald knew that it would be difficult for him to accept it for the moment. It would be a pie in the sky for an ordinary person to have $800,000 all of a sudden. He looked at Jacob with a smile and said, don't think too much. Add me online and then give me your number. I still have something to do and can't keep your company now. I will contact you tomorrow. Okay. Jacob took out his phone. After Gerald left his number and line ID, he smiled and looked at Jacob, who was dumbfounded. Then he turned and walked toward the compound. Jacob needed to take a moment alone. Back in the compound, he went straight to his aunt's house. When he arrived at the door of his house, his father especially left the door open for him. Obviously, there were a lot of people in his aunt's house. At this time, it was noisy. Hey, Mason? Actually, no offense. It's just that Gerald committed a crime back then. It's a bit shameless. You should call him in. Tell him not to come here. So many people in our family are here. The one who spoke was Jadon Cope, Gerald's uncle. Gerald's mother had 3 sisters in her family. His mother was Yasmin Cope, the second eldest sister. She had a younger sister, Lilia Cope, who was also Gerald's aunt. The one who spoke just now was Gerald's eldest uncle. Yes, Yasmin? Lilia also said, you know, back then, I liked Gerald the most. We didn't expect that he would commit a crime. Today is my birthday again, and our family members are all here. It's a good thing that Gerald got out of prison, but if he comes here, how should we get along with him? Lilia. At this time, a haggard voice sounded, Gerald must have been wronged. We all know him well. How could he do that? The door was slammed shut with a bang all of a sudden. Jadon said again, Yasmin, Mason, we are indeed a bit biased. Yet, what Gerald did made some trouble for us back then. That matter made quite a big sensation in Sacramento. At that time, we had something to do with Gerald, making me lose my salary. At that time, you know that it is a good thing that Gerald came back now, but it may not be for us. In short, you should call him. And tell him not to come here. Yes, he brought great shame on us back then. Various voices came from inside. Gerald stood there and frowned slightly. He had thought that when he returned to Sacramento, his relatives and friends would all be biased against him. It was just that. He had not expected that they would be so biased against him after 9 years. Gerald was really wronged, and even if he did make a mistake, it has been 9 years. Can't you give him a chance to turn on a new leaf? Mason said. Mason, take a look at everyone's attitude. We're not just saying it. He did something wrong, Jadon said again. Lilia frowned and said, Yasmin, just call him. Here is the thing. Many family members are here today. This is indeed inappropriate. How about this? I will visit him personally tomorrow and introduce him to a job. What do you think? Mason is a president, but he does not have any power over personnel. Outside the door, Gerald listened to their discussion with a complicated expression on his face. After a while, under their persuasion, his phone finally rang. He let out a breath and said with a smile on his face. Hello, Dad. Gerald. Mason's voice was a little melancholic. Dad, well, I may not be able to make it today. Just now, I met my childhood friend Jacob, the one I knew in kindergarten. He insists on treating me to a meal. I can't refuse him, Gerald said with a smile. He did not want to pressure Mason. When Mason heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, All right, come home early after dinner. I'll eat at your aunt's place later and bring your mother back. You know what, your mother was thrilled to hear that you were back. Gerald nodded and said, Okay. I have got to go. With that, he hung up the phone. Looking at the door, he sighed and turned to walk to the elevator. After leaving the compound, Gerald walked down the street. In Sacramento, he didn't know where to go for the moment. I have to hurry up. Otherwise, these prejudices will keep haunting me, Gerald said. He didn't care about his uncle and the others looking down on him, but he didn't want his parents to bear the pressure. He stopped a taxi and said, Go to a bar. The driver asked, Which bar? Just pick one randomly, Gerald said. The driver acted as if he got Gerald and started the car. Half an hour later, the car stopped on the bar street in Sacramento. The driver pointed outside with a smile and said, This should be one of the best bars in Sacramento. Gerald glanced at it. The name of the bar was Flame Bar. Gerald paid the taxi fare, got out of the car, and walked into the bar. However, it was just over 7 o'clock in the evening. There were not many people in the bar. Gerald walked in and asked for a booth. Then he sat down, ordered a lot of wine, and drank alone. On the stage of the bar, a gorgeous beauty was standing on it. She was holding a guitar and singing some love songs. As time passed, the number of people began to increase. The girl who was singing walked down from the stage. Then a DJ went on stage, and some music with strong beats began to play. Some people on the dance floor began to dance to the rhythm. The entire bar seemed to wake up, and countless young men and women were dancing. Gerald chose to watch coldly and did not participate. Gerald just calmly drank glass after glass of wine. Gerald was not drunk. Gerald just wanted to drink after hearing about his relatives' prejudice against him. There was a plop. At this time, a girl in a black dress suddenly sat down in Gerald's booth. Then, she took a glass from the table, picked up Gerald's wine, and poured it into the glass. She did not speak, and then directly drank the wine. Hey, this seems to be my wine. Gerald looked up and glanced at the woman. Gerald was slightly surprised. This woman was surprisingly beautiful. Unlike most people in the bar who wore heavy makeup and little clothes, she didn't even have makeup on. Her body was completely wrapped in a black dress and nothing was exposed. When she heard Gerald's words, she just glanced at Gerald and said, I'll pay you later. And aren't you men all like this? Aunt, you're just coveting my body. When I get drunk, I'll give you a chance. She spoke very bluntly as if she was in a bad mood. Gerald smiled and didn't care too much. Gerald had just casually said a few words. After the woman poured a glass, she seemed to feel unsatisfied and began to drink from the bottle. After taking a big gulp, she looked at Gerald and said with a sneer, "All men are bad things." Gerald ignored her ridicule and sat there alone. Just like that, they both had a rather strange atmosphere. Gerald and the girl in the black dress sat opposite each other. They did not lean against each other. They drank and did not communicate. The girl drank a few mouthfuls and scolded a few words that men were not good. Gerald estimated that she had just got dumped. However, Gerald did not care too much about it. Gerald pondered and thought that after he finished drinking this, he could go home. After a while, several people quickly approached the booth. One of them quickly approached the girl in the black dress and said, "Gigi, I finally found you." The girl, Gigi Fenna, seemed to be a little drunk. Gigi held the bottle and looked up at the young man in front of her and scolded, "Can you get lost? Ads by Pub Future." "Gigi, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I was wrong." The man quickly said, "Even if you don't forgive me, you can't just come to the bar and find a man to drink with." As he spoke, he looked at Gerald, and then his expression changed slightly. He said, "Gerald." Gerald looked up. Gerald felt that the person in front of him was somewhat familiar. After a moment, Gerald remembered the name of the person in front of him. Andrew Zumthor could be considered a member of Sacramento's Zumthor family. Andrew was also a member of Henley's family. However, Andrew was only a relative. Andrew was not on the same level as Henley in the family. However, in this kind of family, even a relative was much better than ordinary people. Andrew and Gerald were high school classmates, and when Andrew was in high school, Andrew also pursued Doreen. Gerald had a good relationship with Doreen at that time. Andrew and Gerald had not been very good. 2 days ago, Henley said that you were out of prison in Los Angeles. I didn't believe it. After all, a person like you who was sentenced to life imprisonment should stay in prison for a lifetime, and now you are back to Sacramento. Andrew looked at Gerald and sneered. Hearing this, Gerald frowned. Gerald looked at Andrew and said, "I'm in a bad mood. Don't bother me." "Humph." Andrew sneered and said, "Gigi is my girlfriend. What did you put in her wine? Do you want to go to prison again? Who I drink with has nothing to do with you." At this time, Gigi seemed to wake up a little. Gigi pushed Andrew away and said, "You and I have broken up. Get out of here, you scum." Andrew was pushed away. Andrew clenched his fist and twisted his neck. Andrew looked at Gerald and said, "Gerald, you're not bad. You just came back to Sacramento, and you already hooked up with my woman. You have been driven out by the Kenneth family. Do you still think that I dare not touch you like before?" Then Andrew said to the people he brought over, "Hold him down for me." At this time, a waiter came over and said, "Mr. Zumthor, this is Flame Bar. If you have any moves, please settle them outside." Andrew frowned. Andrew looked grim as if he was afraid of something. Then, Andrew gritted his teeth and glared at Gerald. Andrew said, "Boy, consider yourself lucky." As Andrew spoke, Andrew walked to Gigi and said, "Gigi, let's go. Don't come to this place alone." Gigi pushed Andrew away again. Then, Gigi suddenly approached Gerald and grabbed his arm. Gigi said in a low voice, "Save me. I will pay for all the drinks." Andrew frowned when he saw this. Andrew looked at Gerald and said, "Gerald, let go of Gigi." Gerald held his wine glass and ignored Andrew. When Andrew saw Gerald like this, anger flashed on his face. Andrew stepped in front of Gerald, raised his hand to slap Gerald on the face, and scolded, "I told you to let go." Don't you understand? There was a bang. Gerald was not in a good mood. Now that Andrew had made his move, Gerald had no reason to hold back. Gerald threw the wine glass to Andrew. The wine splashed on Andrew's face. Then, Gerald grabbed Andrew's arm. At this time, the waiter appeared again. He seemed to have seen such scenes. He looked at Gerald and said, "Sir, this is Flame Bar. If you want to make a move, please go outside." Gerald looked at the waiter and said, "Andrew was the one who attacked first. Can't I defend myself?" The waiter said calmly with a threat, "But this is Flame Bar. I don't care if you are defending yourself or not. As long as you take action, you have to bear the consequences." "Oh," Gerald said indifferently. The waiter revealed a smile. In Flame Bar, no one dares to make a move. However, just as Gerald finished speaking, the waiter's pupils contracted slightly. The waiter found that Gerald, who had been sitting, had broken free from Gigi. Then, Gerald stood up all of a sudden and let go of Andrew's hand. At the same time, Gerald slapped Andrew and said, "Get lost." Andrew felt a burning pain on his face. Andrew was slapped back a few steps and the people Andrew brought quickly caught him. Andrew covered his face and glared at Gerald. "You dare to hit me? I think you don't want to live anymore." Besides Andrew, the waiter also looked at Gerald coldly and said, "Sir, I remember that I just reminded you that you have to pocket the results if you make a move, right?" Gerald glanced at the waiter and said, "Andrew made a move first, and I slapped him. That's all." The waiter sneered, took out his walkie-talkie, and said, "Someone is causing trouble in booth 7. There were bangs. As soon as the waiter finished speaking, there was a burst of sound. More than a dozen people instantly rushed toward the waiter. At the same time, the commotion on their side also attracted the attention of many people. "Isn't this Andrew? Did you come to Flame Bar to cause trouble? Do you think that you can provoke me under Henley's wing?" In the crowd, a man with a buzz cut and a leather jacket walked out and looked at Andrew with a forced smile. When Andrew saw this person, his expression changed slightly. The waiter quickly walked over and said, "The person who made the move was him." The man looked at Gerald and was stunned for a moment. Then he sneered and said, "TSK, TSK, Gerald. Amo just told me the day before yesterday that he would go to Los Angeles to find you. I didn't expect you to come here yourself." Amo was Doreen's brother, the first-in-line successor of the Cauchy family. Obviously, after Henley returned to Sacramento, Henley told Amo about what happened to Gerald in Los Angeles. Because Doreen was defiled, Amo had always wanted to make a move on Gerald. At that time, Gerald was thrown straight into prison. Amo had not been able to make a move. Obviously, the 9 years that Gerald had served could not offset Amo's hatred. Now that Gerald was out of prison, Amo wanted to continue his revenge. "Drag him out for me. Beat him up first and then get to know what happened." The man with the buzz cut chuckled and said, "By the way, give Amo a call and ask him to come over. Tell him that we have caught Gerald." Gigi seemed to have completely woken up. At this time, Gigi's face turned pale. Gigi never expected that things would become like this. In the bar, many people were looking at Gerald. Surrounded by more than a dozen people, Gerald remained quite calm, while the girl in the black dress next to him changed her expression and hurriedly said, "This is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? There is nothing to misunderstand. Take him away." The short-haired man tittered and glanced at Gerald. Gerald did not know this person even without the slightest impression of him. As for why this man knew him, he could probably guess. Since Amo wanted to teach him a lesson in Los Angeles, he naturally showed Gerald's photos to his subordinates. He slowly let out a breath, looked at the short-haired man, and said, "I said that he was the one who started the fight. Does it matter who started the fight? The short-haired man chuckled and looked at Gerald. You were digging your own grave. You defiled Amo's sister, and even dared to come to his turf. How dare you? Take him away. In an instant, several people approached Gerald. Opposite Gerald, Andrew's face showed a gloating look. Gerald looked around and frowned after finding that there were too many people in the surroundings. Night Watch usually kept a low profile and would not make a move in public. Previously, when Gerald attacked others, including Fletcher, he was certain that they would not tell anyone about this matter. However, things were different. Under the watchful eyes of the public, if his extraordinary strength was exposed, it would violate the rules of Night Watch. He frowned slightly and endured it. Don't touch me. I can walk by myself. Gerald glanced indifferently at the two people who were approaching him. Well, kid, you are quite brash. The person who came over was a strong man. When he heard Gerald's words, he grinned. I just want to provoke you. What can you do to me? As he spoke, he directly reached out his hand towards Gerald. At this time, Gerald grabbed his fingers, exerted force on his wrist, and suddenly bent the man's fingers downwards. Ah! In the next instant, the strong man let out a scream. Under the crowd's gazes, he couldn't use those extraordinary martial arts but ordinary martial arts, which was still no problem. No one had expected that Gerald would dare to attack under such circumstances. The short-haired man licked his lips. How dare you assault him? Interesting. No wonder you've been sent to prison before. Let go. The others quickly surrounded him and said in a low voice. Gerald raised his eyebrows slightly and pushed him back. Ads by Pub Future. He said, I'll go with you, but don't fucking touch me. Whoever touches me will die. You. They were furious when they saw that Gerald still dared to speak to them in such a manner. At this time, the short-haired man waved his hand. Let him walk by himself. When we reach a place with no one around, let's kick his ass. A smile appeared on Gerald's lips. People were leading the way. Gerald was just about to step out when the black-dressed beauty called Gigi hurriedly said, You can't go with them. You will be beaten to death by them. This girl was kind and righteous. Gerald stared at her with a smile and then ignored her. He followed the group of people and left the bar, walking through the back door of the bar. The beautiful woman in the black dress was anxious, but there was nothing she could do. She wanted to follow, but she was very afraid. Meanwhile, Andrew said with a smile, Gigi, be good, okay? I am wrong. Let's go back first, okay? I don't know how you found him, but this guy is a rapist. 9 years ago, Bree Cousy was defiled by this bastard. Amo is a shareholder of this bar. Since Gerald fell into the hands of Amo, he'll be hit to death by them. Moreover, he deserves it. It's all because of you. You scum. The black-dressed beauty screamed and ran towards the door of the bar without looking back. When she reached the door, she stood up and paced back and forth. Later, Andrew also ran out with his people and tried to persuade her, but the black-dressed beauty ignored him. She knew the thing started because of her. She hoped to wait at the door. If Gerald was seriously injured later, she could send Gerald to the hospital immediately. Gerald was led by more than a dozen people through the back door of the bar. Behind the bar was relatively open land. After Gerald was brought to the back, when the back door opened, a person behind Gerald said in a low voice, There were so many people just now. We don't want to ruin the business and image of the bar. Damn it. How dare you attack me? While talking, he directly jumped behind and raised his foot to kick Gerald. A cold light suddenly flashed in Gerald's eyes. He slightly turned sideways, reached out his right hand, grabbed that man's leg, and pulled it. Gerald pulled straight that man's leg and the man was forced to do the splits. Ah! How could he have such flexibility? He let out a scream. Fuck you. When the others saw that Gerald still dared to make a move, they let out waves of roars. Don't worry. At this time, the short-haired man said happily. After the group of angry people stopped talking, the short-haired man sneered, stepped forward, surveyed Gerald, and said, "Let me introduce myself. My name is Enoch Sanchez. Just call me Enoch. Your skills are not bad. It seems that you have practiced a lot in prison these years," Enoch said as he stared at Gerald. Gerald stood there and calmly looked at Enoch. "Are you sure you want to attack me?" "Oh," Enoch asked with a smirk. Gerald swept his gaze across the crowd and shrugged his shoulders. "All right, I'm not in a good mood. I might be happy after a fight, but you only have 13 people. I'm afraid that you can't win." Enoch looked at Gerald, narrowed his eyes slightly, lit a cigarette, took a few steps back, and waved. "Go ahead. Kick his ass. But don't beat him to death. Amo should be on his way here." The group of people laughed sinisterly. Gerald let out a breath and also smiled at them. "Go on." In the next instant, some shouted and some rushed up to hold Gerald. Behind them, Enoch had a cigarette in his mouth with his hands in his pocket as if he was going to watch a good show. In front of him, 13 people surrounded Gerald. He only saw the crowd moving up and down, but he could not see what happened clearly. Screams could be heard from time to time. "Ah, ah, ah." In the middle, in the face of 12 people, Gerald moved so fast that it was almost impossible for these people to touch him. Bang, bang, bang. Gerald's gaze was cold as he dodged and attacked. These strong men were more powerful than ordinary people, but in front of Gerald, they were nothing. Gerald clenched his fists and punched them so hard. In just a few minutes, more and more people were beaten to the ground. Behind them, Enoch's cigarette froze in his mouth. He even forgot to take a puff and just stared blankly at what was happening in front of him. Bang! Suddenly, the last person was punched in the lower abdomen by Gerald. Then he was thrown into the air and smashed, quote, hard on the ground in front of Enoch. Gerald clapped his hands, looked at Enoch, and said, "I said that you couldn't win, right?" Enoch swallowed hard as his pupils shrank and he stared at Gerald in shock. Then, he asked in a trembling voice, How is this possible? He defeated 13 people. What happened? Is he making a fucking movie?" thought Enoch. Then he suddenly saw Gerald, who was in front of him, walking towards him with a smile. Enoch was the backup of Flame Bar, which was enough to prove that he was an experienced person. He had seen some people who could fight several people, but this was the first time he had encountered someone who could fight a dozen people alone. And the most important thing was that it was too fast. Looking at the dozen people lying on the ground, as well as the guy who sat on the ground with a split, Enoch began to sweat on his forehead. "Gerald, think about it carefully. This is the Flame Bar. Amo is very dissatisfied with you. How dare you fight? This is definitely not over. Even if you are still in the Kenneth family, Amo is not someone you can afford to provoke. And now you are not part of the Kenneth family." Enoch wiped the sweat from his forehead. Gerald walked up to him and looked at him with a smile. Then, he took out his cigarette from his pocket, took out a cigarette, and lit it up. "So, you can cripple me as long as I can still recognize people. But I can't hit you, right?" Hearing this, Enoch felt nervous. "This is the rule of Flame Bar." Enoch sneered and said, "I underestimated you. I didn't expect you to be so good at fighting, but you actually dared to attack the people of Flame Bar. Gerald, you just returned to Sacramento. You don't want to ruin your life in Sacramento. Are you threatening me?" Gerald spat out a mouthful of smoke toward Enoch's face. When Enoch heard Gerald, he subconsciously thought that Gerald was a little scared. Enoch nodded and said, "I guess so. Amo is still unwilling to let it go." Gerald blew out a smoke ring and said, "Then I'll give him a gift." Bang! In the next instant, he suddenly exerted force and grabbed Enoch's neck. Enoch only felt a huge force coming over. He was unable to resist at all. In an instant, he was pressed down by Gerald and ruthlessly smashed against the wall next to him. Enoch's face was directly pressed against the wall. In an instant, his face was swollen, and his nose was bleeding. He collapsed to the ground. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. Gerald squatted down in front of him and looked at Enoch. He said indifferently, "Hey, I already said that I was in a bad mood. You provoked me again and again. Why?" As he spoke, he extinguished the cigarette and looked at Enoch. "By the way, tell Amo that I was wronged. I will only explain it once. It is his business whether he believes it or not. If he continues to mess up with me by asking ads by pub future people like you to deal with me, I will take it all. But at the same time, he has to bear the consequences." As he spoke, Gerald stood up and pushed open the door of the bar's back door. At the door, he stopped and said, "Oh, Vaithe. Wait. Tell him that he can interpret my words as a threat." Now that he was back and wanted to investigate the truth, Gerald had to show his fangs. People in Flame Bar would not expose him. If others knew that the people from Flame Bar were beaten up by Gerald alone, then the rules made by Flame Bar that people were not allowed to fight in the bar would become bullshit. Seeing Gerald leave the back alley, after a long time, the people on the ground began to get up one by one. None of them were in good condition, and most of them were bruised and swollen. Fuck. Enoch also recovered from the shock. He wiped the blood on his face and scolded with a gloomy face. Ever since he followed Amo in Sacramento, no one dared to attack him. In these years, Gerald was the first person to beat him so badly. He had learned to fight before. He knew Amo because they learned fighting skills together. But in front of Gerald, he had no power to resist. "Go back first," he said, gnashing his teeth. Gerald didn't care so much. When he returned to Sacramento, he had already guessed that he would encounter a lot of trouble. Naturally, Amo would definitely come to him. Henley would definitely make things difficult for him too. It went the same for the Kenneth family. He had returned. The path might not be easy to take, but that was for the former Gerald. For Gerald now, these rich families in Sacramento meant nothing. Walking into the bar, he settled the bill and walked towards the door. Just as he walked to the door, a surprise voice sounded. "You are actually fine." The one who spoke was the beauty dressed in black. Beside her, Andrew and the others were still standing there. Seeing Gerald come out unharmed, Andrew and the others were filled with disbelief. Gerald touched his nose, looked at the beauty, and then said, "You want me to get injured?" "That's not what I meant," the beauty in a black skirt quickly said. Gerald waved his hand, took out his mobile phone, opened the PayPal, and said, "Give me the money. You just said that you would pay half of the bill after drinking my wine. The wine cost a total of $888. You should give me $444. The girl in a black skirt was stunned for a moment and then quietly took out her mobile phone. "Gerald, are you a fucking man? It's your honor that Gigi drank your wine. Now you want her to pay. Don't you feel ashamed?" Andrew said with a cold snort. Gerald didn't bother to talk to him and just looked at the girl in a black skirt. The girl in a black skirt showed her phone and introduced herself at the same time as she paid. "My name is Gigi Fenner." Hearing Gigi introduce herself to Gerald, Andrew was so angry. He looked at Gerald and said, "Gerald, you want to steal my girl?" "I don't care about you," Gerald said lightly. As he spoke, he opened the door of a taxi that was parked outside and directly got into it. "You don't even have a car. How dare you be so proud?" Andrew said with disdain. However, Andrew didn't do anything. Gerald was brought away by the people of Flame Bar but came back safe and sound. It had never happened before since the Flame Bar opened. In fact, the reason why he was afraid after being scolded by the waiter was the reputation of Flame Bar. The people who fought in the bar would be brought to the back door, and when they came out again, no one was fit. He did not know how Gerald did it, so he did not dare to act rashly. Looking at Gerald, who was far away, he turned to Gigi and said, "Gigi, let me drive you home. Can you get lost?" Gigi looked at him coldly and said, "We have already broken up, and there is no turning back. You have affairs. You are a jerk. Compared with that man, you suck." As she spoke, she hailed a taxi and got into it. Only Andrew, who had a gloomy expression on his face, was left standing there. He gritted his teeth and said, "Gerald." Half an hour later, in Flame Bar, a burly man in his 30s walked into the bar. After walking into the bar, he went straight to the office area of the bar and pushed open the door of an office. He smelled a strong smell of alcohol. Then, he saw more than 10 people in the office wiping their faces with alcohol as they moaned in pain. The most miserable one was a man sitting on the sofa. His legs spread out, trembling slightly. He occasionally let out a painful groan that was terrifying. "Didn't you say you caught Gerald? What's going on now?" The person who came was the first heir of the Caussy family, Amo Caussy. "Where is Enoch?" As Amo spoke, he looked around and soon saw Enoch, who was sitting on the chair in the office with a lot of gauze on his head. His face flashed with anger, and Amo said, "Who did it?" "Gerald." Enoch's tone was also not very good, with a trace of embarrassment. Indeed, they had been defeated by a single person, and it was a little shameful. Looking at Amo's darkening face, Enoch gritted his teeth and said, "He said that he was wronged. Whether you believe it or not, he would only explain it once. If you want to mess up with him, he will take it all. But you have to bear. This is a threat. The consequences." He also said that. After Amo heard this, his face changed in anger. Then he slapped the table and scolded, "Good. A rapist who defiled my sister dared to threaten me. I must kill this jerk." At the same time, in the best restaurant in Sacramento, several people were sitting inside. Inside the restaurant, there were more than 10 people, including Henley, Doreen, Audrey, Hazel, Kiera, and Tyrone, whom Gerald had met on the plane, sitting at the table. In addition, there were several other young people from Los Angeles who had come to welcome Audrey. However, at this time, Tyrone looked a little embarrassed. His face was wet with water, and his eyes seemed to have been beaten. His eyes were red and swollen. "Look at you. You are just a celebrity. How dare you throw your weight around before us?" Audrey pointed at Tyrone's nose and said, "You actually dare to make a move on Kiera." Henley said that he would take Tyrone to some beautiful women. Tyrone liked Kiera at first sight because she was sensible and mature. Tyrone even touched her thigh when toasting. Hazel caught him. How could Hazel endure this? She was so angry that she directly attacked Tyrone. Tyrone was punched. After Audrey found it out, she poured another glass of water on his face. Henley looked at them and said with a frown, "Audrey, you are going a bit too far. Tyrone did do something wrong just now, but the reason is that he likes Kiera. He is indeed a bit frivolous, but no matter what, he is my friend. You did this to him. Isn't it too much for me?" Audrey frowned and said, "Then what are you gonna do, Henley?" Tyrone sneered and wiped the water on his face. "Audrey, right. The daughter of the richest man in Los Angeles. But remember, this is Sacramento. You are the daughter of the richest man in Los Angeles. But it is not a big deal in Sacramento." Beside him, Doreen, who had been silent, looked up at Henley and said coldly, "Tell him to get lost." Henley frowned. Tyrone was stunned. They did not expect Doreen to suddenly speak. Doreen. Henley looked at Doreen. Doreen did not back down. She said lightly, "These are my best friends. Your terrible friends should be more respectful. Although the Kelsey family seems to be on the decline, protecting my friends is not a big problem for me. If Tyrone does not leave today, then our engagement will be cancelled." Henley frowned, but then he put on a smile and said, "Don't be angry. Don't be angry. This is indeed his fault. Okay, you guys, chat first. I'll take them out to have fun." As he spoke, he winked at the others. At the table, several men stood up and left the room. Ads by Pub Future. After they left, Audrey swore, "What the hell?" Doreen was silent. After a moment, she raised her head and asked, "By the way, how has Gerald been in your company recently?" Audrey pouted and said, "What can I do? He is still late every day. Today, I planned to take him with me. But this morning, I waited for him till 19 o'clock. He actually did not come to the company. I was so angry." Doreen frowned and said, "Does he not cherish his job?" Chapter 60. He does not need to work at all. In fact, he is in the new bank. When she said this, Kiera pulled Audrey. Audrey reacted and said, "Anyway, I don't care about this guy. My dad likes him very much. He probably won't be fired. Do you think he will come to Sacramento?" Doreen suddenly asked. Their expressions changed as they looked strangely at Doreen. Beside her, Penny curled her lips and said, "Why should he come here? I don't want to see him." Hearing her words, Hazel frowned and said, "Actually, Gerald is a good guy." Beep beep. At this time, Doreen picked up her phone. She looked at it. She answered the phone and said, "Hello, Amo." It was Amo. "Hello, Doreen. I have something to tell you. Gerald is in Sacramento. Stay away from this guy. If he dares to come to you, call me immediately. This guy must be interested in you. I think that he will try to ruin your engagement party with Henley," Amo said. "We can't make any mistakes at your engagement party. Do you understand?" "What?" Doreen's tone revealed a trace of shock. "Yes, he just came to my bar and had some conflicts with my staff," Amo said with a sneer. "I see." Doreen exhaled. After she hung up the phone, no one noticed that there was a flash of joy in Doreen's eyes. Then, she looked at everyone and said, "Gerald has come to Sacramento." "Huh." In the restaurant, the rest of the people all looked at her in surprise. When Gerald returned home, his parents also came back. When Yasmin saw Gerald, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing. She pulled Gerald and chatted with him. They chatted until 1 a.m. in the morning before reluctantly going to bed. The night was silent. When Gerald woke up the next day, it was already past 10 in the morning. After he washed up, he called Jacob. He got through instantly. On the other end of the line, Jacob scolded, "Damn you, why did you only call me now? I thought I had a dream," and slapped myself several times. Gerald laughed. "Where am I going to work?" Jacob asked. "Universe Group," Gerald said calmly. "The ... Universe Group." When he heard this, Jacob stuttered. Even in Washington, Universe Group was no worse than the companies belonging to those top families. And the most important thing was that Gerald had 70% of the shares of Universe Group, and 30% of the shares were Valerie's. Gerald's father also worked here, but in order to make his father more relaxed, Gerald had ordered the people here to not give Mason work to do. The current head of the company was a former member of Night Watch. However, during a mission, he was severely injured and lost an arm. He could no longer withstand the hard work in Night Watch. After leaving Night Watch, he took over the management of the company at the request of Gerald and Valerie. And Gerald was the most mysterious president of this company. Gerald went to Universe Group not only to get Jacob a job here but also to use Universe Group's ability to figure out what was going on with the logistics company. He simply got dressed and went out. Half an hour later, he arrived at the entrance of Universe Group on time. Jacob was already waiting there. Fuck, bro, are you kidding me? You have been in prison for 9 years. When you came out, you told me that you were the boss of Universe Group. Are you kidding me? When Jacob saw Gerald, he ran over and scolded him. Gerald said helplessly, I told you that I was not in prison. Why don't you believe me? Gerald, don't lie to me. Universe Group is one of the largest companies in Sacramento. Its business abounds everywhere, and its market value is more than $16 billion. Jacob still felt it was a little unbelievable. Oh, don't worry. From today on, you will work here. Have you seen this office building? From today on, you will have a huge and luxurious office. Gerald patted Jacob on the shoulder and said, Oh, no kidding. Let's go. Jacob felt that Gerald was playing a prank on him. It was completely beyond his expectations. At this time, a car suddenly stopped in front of them. The window of the car rolled down, and a head poked out from the passenger seat. He shouted suspiciously, Jacob. Gerald also turned around. At this time, Gerald moved slightly. There were 2 people in the car, with a woman in the front passenger seat and a man with glasses in the driver's seat. Gerald knew both of them. They were their high school classmate. The man was the class monitor, named Kian Hobson, and the woman was the hottest girl in the class, named Dia Moss. When Gerald saw them, they also saw Gerald. Dia said in surprise, Gerald, did you actually come out of prison? Didn't you say that you were sentenced to life imprisonment? Gerald frowned. In the driver's seat, Kian opened the car door. He walked out. He looked at Gerald and Jacob and said with a smile, Did you come to our company for an interview? We only take well-educated people. Because Jacob thought that he was coming for work, he decided to wear a very formal suit, which made Kian think that Gerald and Jacob were there for a job interview. Then Gerald and Jacob both frowned. Before Gerald and Jacob could speak, Kian continued, How did you get the interview notice? Normally, our company would only hire people who graduated from top universities. But since we are classmates, I can give you 2 some special treatment. In fact, I am already a manager at Universe Group. I have some good connections and an annual salary of more than $200,000. I will help you. As he spoke, Kian looked at Gerald. Jacob might be fine, but Gerald, you have been in prison before. It's really impossible for you to join our company. Gerald and Jacob were speechless. They thought to themselves, Did we ask you? Why are you telling us everything about yourself? Showing off. Gerald smiled in his heart and then said, No, I'm not here for an interview. I came here with Jacob. Kian nodded. So that's what it is. Jacob did not want to hear Kian brag all the time, so Jacob quickly changed the topic. Does Dia work here too? There seems to be something between the 2 of you. Kian showed a trace of pride on his face and then said, Yes, Dia worked here before, and now we have been married for a year. Goodness, you actually marry one of the school belles. Jacob punched Kian in the chest and said. Back in high school, Dia and Doreen were the most beautiful girls on campus. Kian frowned and patted his chest. Then he looked at Gerald and Jacob. Work hard on your interview then. I will talk to the interviewer as well. You know, if you can work in our company and you pass the probation period, you surely will have a higher salary than you earned from your previous job. Of course, if you want to reach my position, you have to work 10 times harder like me. Meanwhile, you must be talented. In the car, Dia seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Gerald and asked, "Do you know that Doreen is getting engaged?" Jacob was stunned and looked at Gerald in surprise. In high school, Gerald and Doreen were very close, and many people felt that the two of them might end up together. Before Gerald could speak, Dia said, "That's true. You just came out of prison, so you certainly do not know. The man is called Henley, the young master of the Zumthor family. They look like a perfect match, though." Ads by Pub Future. Kian nodded and said, "Indeed. I didn't expect that our school belle would be married. By the way, their engagement party was scheduled for Saturday. Doreen's family invited many of our high school classmates, more than 20 people. Doreen will also be there. We plan to meet up on Saturday. I organized it, by the way, and it is at the Felicity Hotel. You two can come too." Jacob and Gerald frowned at the same time. But Kian still smiled and said, "Don't worry. Everyone won't care that you just came out of prison. We are all good classmates. And if Jacob did not pass the interview today, he might find another job when meeting our classmate over there. They might as well introduce you to some jobs." "Okay, we can go then. I haven't seen them for many years." Gerald touched his nose and said, "Sure, I still have documents to hand in. I have to go." Kian nodded. After getting in the car, Kian thought of something and said, "By the way, we will split the bill by then. I think it is about $500 for everyone. You do have that money, right? Remember to bring them with you." As Kian spoke, he started the car and drove toward the company. Seeing them leave, Jacob scolded, "This fucker. How dare he keep showing off?" Meanwhile, Gerald heard the conversation between Kian and Dia. Dia said, "Gerald is actually out of prison. But he has been chased away from the Kenneth family. Look at his clothes. He must be broke." Gerald was the best student at school, and his family was rich. But guess what he did? A rapist can only be at the bottom of society for the rest of his life. "He is nothing like us, and we will not meet him often," Kian said disdainfully. "And Jacob actually came to our company for an interview. He won't really work in our company, will he?" Dia said, "Don't worry. I'll go talk to the interviewer later. In Universe Group, we don't just take in anyone," Kian replied disdainfully. Then Gerald touched his nose, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He looked at Jacob next to him and asked, "He just showed off in front of us all the time. Are you angry?" Jacob scolded, "How should I put it? I just don't like it. I don't know why he is showing off all the time. But it's not our thing. Though, he is really at the peak of his life now. A small manager of Universe Group surely has a better salary than the two of us." Gerald grinned and said, "What if you are his supervisor or even an executive? Do you think he will be even angrier when he sees you?" Jacob's whole body trembled, and he said, "Bro, let's stop messing around. Are you lying to me? Where am I going to work? I just fucking quit my job yesterday." Gerald smiled and took out his phone. He made a call to Valerie. After all, Gerald brought Jacob there. If they were stopped by the security guards later, Gerald would feel a little embarrassed. So he planned to let the current leader of Universe Group come down to pick them up. The leader of Universe Group was Leandro Hansen. Because of the accident 3 years ago, Gerald lost Leandro's phone number. Soon, the phone was connected. On the other side of the phone, Valerie asked, "What's the matter?" "I miss you," Gerald coughed and said. "If you don't want to talk about it, I'll hang up," Valerie snorted and said. "Well, give me Leandro's phone number," Gerald hurriedly said. Valerie snorted again. "Did you go to Sacramento?" Gerald nodded. "Yes. Remember to investigate Watchman No. 2. When the time comes, we will send 2 people to cooperate with you," Valerie said. Gerald nodded. "Got it." After that, he hung up the phone. Soon, Leandro's phone number was sent over, and Gerald dialed again. Beside Gerald, Jacob narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at Gerald with a strange and shocked expression. Jacob knew Leandro. In Sacramento, everyone knew about Leandro, the entrepreneur, and the CEO of Universe Group. At the same time, Jacob's heart sank slightly. If Gerald really knew Leandro, he would not have asked someone else for Leandro's phone number. Gerald ignored Jacob and quickly called Leandro. The phone was also quickly connected. And a middle-aged man answered the phone. "Hello. Hey. Guess who I am?" Gerald said. On the other side of the line, after a brief moment of shock, an excited voice was suddenly heard. "You are still alive. Where are you?" "I am downstairs at Universe Group," Gerald said with a smile. Toot. Leandro hung up the phone. Beside him, Jacob was completely speechless. He looked at Gerald and asked, "What should we do next?" "Just wait. Leandro will come down and pick us up," Gerald replied with a smile. Looking at Gerald's confident expression, Jacob began to doubt himself. He still found it hard to believe. But when he thought about the $800,000 Gerald transferred yesterday, Jacob began to look forward to Leandro's arrival. If Jacob could work in Universe Group, his parents would feel so proud and tell everybody about it. After about 3 minutes, Jacob's pupils contracted slightly. He saw a middle-aged man in a suit not far away. The man was like a runaway horse, moving toward the door. To be precise, Leandro was rushing over. Who else could it be but Leandro? A few security guards looked over curiously. They did not expect their boss to run out. Leandro rushed in front of Gerald. Under Jacob's surprised gaze, Leandro stood upright a few feet in front of them. At that time, Leandro's eyes were red, and tears flowed down. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Leandro raised his right hand and saluted Gerald. At the same time, he muttered, "For every being who is breathing." Gerald and Jacob were standing at the huge entrance of Universe Group. Opposite them, 7 or 8 security guards looked over curiously. They saw the CEO and the current highest executive of Universe Group standing in front of Gerald and Jacob with his body trembling and tears flowing down his face. To the people of Universe Group, Leandro was not the boss of the company. He was only the executor. However, the real boss of the company had never shown up. They did not even know what the boss of the company looked like. Therefore, to the people of Universe Group, Leandro was the most powerful one in the company. And now, Leandro was facing a young man, making a standard military salute. At the same time, Leandro murmured, "For every being who is breathing." Gerald smiled slightly, then grinned and said together with Leandro, "We devote ourselves to the future we want." Then the two of them paused at the same time and said at the same time, "We shall never give up." This was the slogan of Night Watch. Before they carried out their tasks, before going to war, and in training, they would shout out the slogan, "Watchman hid in the dark, guarding the peace of this world." After saying that, the smile on Gerald's face became even brighter. Leandro rushed over and hugged Gerald tightly. Leandro shouted in a low voice, "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't die like this. You are the worst person I have ever met. I know you won't die so easily." Gerald chuckled. Beside him, Jacob was shocked. He opened his mouth widely. He couldn't believe what he had heard. He thought, what was going on? Jacob was surprised that Gerald knew Leandro and that they had a good relationship. "Let's go to your office first. I have something to talk to you about," Gerald said. "Okay," Leandro said. As he spoke, he looked at Jacob and asked, "Who is this?" Gerald said, "My friend who grew up with me. I asked him to come here to work. I promised him that the annual salary would be $800,000. We can talk about the specific work later. Let's go up first." Anyway, this company is yours. You can do whatever you want, Leandro smiled. Jacob was about to faint. Jacob thought, what the hell is going on? Universe Group is one of the largest companies in Sacramento. It is comparable to the top family industries. But Leandro just said that the company belonged to Gerald. Ads by Pub Future. Wasn't Gerald arrested and sent to jail? Moreover, in the past, Gerald didn't have much relation with the Kenneth family. Gerald's life was only a bit better than ordinary people's. Don't just stand there. Let's go to the company first, Gerald said. Jacob was pulled by Gerald and walked into Leandro's office in a daze. After sitting down, Gerald said, there's an employee called Kian Hobson, right? Leandro nodded. Yeah, he seems to be the marketing supervisor of the marketing department. What's wrong? Nothing. Jacob's title should be 2 levels higher than Kian's. You can do this, right? Gerald said. Leandro nodded and looked at Jacob. He said, no problem. At this time, Jacob finally came back to his senses. He hurriedly said, wait a minute. Gerald, what exactly is going on? How can you be the boss of Universe Group? My brain is in a mess. Leandro laughed. He knew that for ordinary people, the situation was indeed very difficult to understand. Gerald let out a breath, looked at Jacob, and said, I told you before that I have not been in prison for 9 years. Instead, I have entered a secret organization. This organization protects the peace of this world. I am Gerald. At this time, Leandro coughed. Night Watch was very secretive. Ordinary people did not know it. And they should not know it. Gerald smiled and said, it's okay. I plan to make him a watchman. Leandro was slightly stunned at first, then looked at Jacob with a trace of envy. Gerald intended to bring Jacob into Night Watch, even though he was a bit old. Gerald also had the same plan for Trevin. But Trevin had a child, and Liam was still studying. Trevin had a lot of attachments. But Jacob was different. Jacob did not have a child now, so his concern was relatively less. In the next half an hour, Gerald and Leandro told Jacob about Night Watch. After listening to it, Jacob still didn't understand what Gerald had said. After all, what Gerald said was too shocking for him. Jacob felt that there were no such kinds of people in this world. At last, when Gerald picked up an iron from Leandro's office and broke it with his bare hands, Jacob completely believed what Gerald said. However, he was still in a daze. Gerald knew that Jacob needed time to understand it. He patted Jacob on the shoulder and said, do not mention these things to anyone, including your parents and the people closest to you. I know, but it's still too unbelievable, Jacob said with a sigh. Gerald nodded. It's fine. Go back and think about it first. Come back next Monday. I have something to discuss with Leandro. Now, Jacob nodded and said, all right. Then I'll go back first. Damn it. All of this seems like a dream. Gerald touched his nose. After Jacob left, Gerald looked at Leandro and said, did you find anything in the past 3 years? Gerald had always wanted to prove his innocence. After Leandro came to Sacramento to take over Universe Group, Gerald asked Leandro to investigate. However, in the past 3 years, Gerald had lost his memory and disappeared. Leandro could not contact Gerald. I haven't found any concrete evidence, but according to my investigation, I am afraid it is related to your father. Leandro exhaled and added, when your father was in the Kenneth family, he was quite capable. However, he was born into a branch family, and there were people in the Kenneth family who did not want him to get power. After the company that your father was in charge of purchasing an asset of the Zumthor family, you were framed. Gerald rolled his eyes and said, so it means that someone wanted my father to die, and I was involved, right? This is just my speculation from my investigation. Several families were involved in it. The matter is complicated, and I have no evidence. Leandro spread his hands and added, by the way, if you want to investigate deeper, be careful. In the past few years, the Zumto family has developed very quickly. I suspect that they have connections with blood. Lotus. Gerald let out a breath and said, understood. There is one more thing. Does Universe Group have any dealings with the Zumto family? Gerald asked. Leandro muttered, we used to have. However, after I realized that they might have a connection with Blood Lotus, I stopped our cooperation. Now, they're one of our competitors. Gerald licked his lips and said, that's good. In a day or two, compete with them, including some of the projects they are still doing. I don't care if we earn money. I just want them to lose money. Leandro shrugged his shoulders and said, okay. The company is yours anyway. Gerald smiled, by the way, don't let my dad know that this company is mine. Got it, Leandro said with a smile. Gerald nodded. All right, I'll leave first. I'll call you if there's anything else I want to tell you. Walking out of Universe Group, Gerald looked around. Then, he let out a breath and began to recall what had happened. Back then, it happened during the winter vacation in the first semester of his first year of university. He clearly remembered that afternoon. It happened to be a gathering of the Kenneth family. The entire family was there. During that gathering, he drank wine and then felt a little dizzy. Logically speaking, with Gerald's alcohol tolerance, it was impossible for him to get drunk just because of that little bit of wine. He thought that someone must have drugged him. When Gerald woke up, he and Bree were lying on the bed of a hotel, and it was very clear that the two had sex. In fact, up until today, Gerald felt aggrieved. It was his first time having sex. He didn't feel anything at all. At that time, Bree had already woken up. After putting on her clothes, she cried and rushed out of the room. After Gerald put on his clothes, Bree found a knife somewhere and rushed back to the room. She chased Gerald and wanted to kill him. The matter was widely spread. Someone called the police to control Bree. Next, the Kelsey family was furious. Gerald was sued, and then he was imprisoned.